You're listening to What It's Like with Luz, a podcast highlighting ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host, Lucy Norris, and on today's episode, I'm joined by an incredibly inspiring racing driver who certainly knows how to feel the fear and do it anyway. First sitting in a Go Kart at the age of 7 in Ecuador, this guest has had quite the career. Moving to Italy alone at 14 to take part in the single-seater world of Formula racing, no one would have ever predicted this young talent would be lying in a coma fighting for his life a few years later. Sharing his journey to Formula 2, the near-fatal crash in Spa last August, future plans and his recovery process during quarantine, here's what it's like to be Juan Manual Correa. Before we get stuck into the episode, I just wanted to say that if there is a drop in sound quality throughout, I'm very sorry, but in respect of social distancing during COVID-19, I've had to record episodes remotely. In this challenging time, we're all trying our best, so I really hope everyone is staying safe and that you enjoy the episode.
So if we start off going back to kind of the very beginning of how this all began with your career, I know you started in karting in 2007, is that right?
Yes, yeah, I began in Ecuador, which is where I was born, and it started as a hobby. Kind of, you hear a very similar story with most racing drivers. It's always a hobby or something to do on the weekends in the beginning, and eventually gets more and more serious as it progresses. And it was the same with me. I raced in Ecuador from 2007 until 2011 when we moved to Miami, and all throughout those years in Ecuador, it became eventually a pretty serious thing. I won 2 national championships there, and then when we moved here to Miami, we didn't move because of the racing. We moved for personal reasons, and it was kind of the same progression again. So I went back to like club races and eventually like regional and national championships here in the US, and I won the national championship in 2013. And that same year, I won the world championship in go karts as well. Throughout all those years, obviously, you go up in categories of age, but with those categories, you also go up in level and the kind of events you go to.
Do you remember what initially drew you to motorsport? Was there a history of it in your family or anything, or just something that you wanted to pick up?
No, there's definitely a lot of history of motorsport in my family, and it's not so clear. Like I never had an uncle or my dad or my grandfather who became like professional drivers, but they were all very much into cars. Like both of my grandparents from both sides raced cars amateurly in their days, but they loved it. My dad raced a bit of rally, also amateurly, but and as well as my uncle. So really, I was brought up with everything that had pretty much an engine and wheels on it. I was on it. So I started with motorcycles actually when I was 4 years old, because my dad was into that, like dirt bikes. And then when my dad went to rally, I tried go karts, and I never wanted to go back on the bike again after trying the go kart.
And then obviously you started go-karting and things when you were really young. So you would have still been in school and everything. So how did you manage school and kind of starting to take karting seriously? And then do you remember, was there ever maybe a moment where you kind of realized you were going to go full speed ahead with this and make it a career?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the beginning, um, obviously I didn't race that much, so it was pretty manageable. And I had to be smart. I was always a good student, so I kind of had that advantage that and my dad always conditioned me and said that if I wanted to race, I needed to get straight A's. And I even had a few times where I didn't, like, I would have a B plus, and he was like, okay, you're not going to practice today, that easy, until I got the grade up. So he was very strict with that, and I think it was a good thing because I didn't neglect my studies, but I definitely did have to work quite hard, just to make up all the work I was losing. And as I was going up in ranking and in categories, it took more time out of my life, for the racing, and I missed more school. And it came to a point in 2000, 2017 or end of 2016 that I couldn't do it anymore with school. Like it was, I was training and traveling almost half of the year, so I was missing around 50% of school time. And at that stage, I was going to a boarding school in Switzerland, and it was just too much. It was too much stress. I was not, I was sacrificing my sleep and my health to do both things. So with my parents, we decided to pull out of school and finish my last 2 years online. So that's what I did.
Did you move to Switzerland for racing, or was that just a personal move?
No, yeah, that was for racing. So in 2013, after I won the world championship, um, I got I signed a contract with an Italian team to race go karts in Italy, and the condition was that I had to move with them to Italy. So 2014, I moved there, and I lived pretty much. I was based in Europe since 2014 up until the accident last year.
How did you find that move? Because you must have been pretty young to move on your own to Europe from Miami.
Yeah, no, it was really tough and lonely. I mean, I moved fully to the other side of the world. I didn't speak the language. I had never lived alone. I was 14.
That's so
It
young.
wa-
Oh my God.
yeah, it was definitely, back then I didn't feel so young, but right now when I see a 14-year-old kid, I'm 20 now, so I can't believe it. I still don't understand how my parents let me go. I mean, it was not easy for them. Trust me, I really had to convince them, and it was hard for them as well. But yeah, that when I see a 14-year-old kid now, I understand why it was so hard for me. And but it forced me, to grow up and to become mature and to kind of look out after myself, because also the racing world in general, it's a pretty ferocious world, and very competitive and very political, and I always had to kind of look out for my best interests, and I think that kind of made me into the person I am today.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing that you were able to go and do that, because when I think of myself at 14, I don't know what I was doing, but I definitely wouldn't have been able to handle something like that. So I don't know too much about the racing world in general, but is it that when you reach a certain point in karting, you just make that natural progression to formula racing, or is it a choice you make, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually kind of a natural progression if you're planning to go to Formula One. So if your dream is like driving single seaters, or even any professional car championship, then you have to make that progression up to Formula 4 or something like that. There are a few people that stay in karting and become professional and get paid in go-karts, but that's very few of them. And a career in go-karts is obviously not as good economically as in cars, obviously. And I mean, for me, it was always my dream to go to Formula One. So as soon as I was able to make the step up to Formula 4 and kind of continue up the ladder, I did it.
Do you remember the day that you joined?
Yeah, I mean, how it works is there are teams in the Formula 4 championships, and you are the one, or you and your management have to talk to these teams and basically ask them for a seat. And what the teams do is they look at the prospects they're getting from karting, the young kids, and they kind of choose, okay, maybe I will try out these 5 kids, which I think can be very good, and then I will choose 3 out of those 5 or something like that. And that's what happened. We went and spoke to an Italian team, and they were one of the best teams in Formula 4 at that moment. And they were like, okay, we will give you a test. And, they never sign you on without really testing you before. So they gave me my first test end of 2015, and it went quite well. And I was signed on for the 2016 season.
And how did you find that transition from karting to single seaters? Was it challenging at all, or was it just so exciting that you weren't really concentrating on the difficulties of changing vehicles?
No, it was definitely very challenging. It was much different than I expected it to be. I guess I always thought that because karting was the step before F4, the change wouldn't be so different. But it was another world totally. You're going from a go-kart, which is obviously very small tires. I mean, it's not. I don't think you can consider a go-kart as a proper car in a way, And then you go into Formula 4, which weighs, 500, 600 kilograms, big tires, quite a lot more power, but also much, much heavier. And you start getting into the aerodynamic um, uh, thing with formulas, which go-karts, they don't have aerodynamics at all. So they don't have wings or anything like that. So it's definitely a lot to take on, and it was a very steep learning curve. But at the same time, like you said, it was really exciting. You feel like a mini Formula One driver in a way, getting into these big cars with your fancy helmets and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it was a very, very good period in my life.
And I guess then from the other side, kind of away from the actual physical driving, what's it like traveling with the circuit? Because I think it looks so much fun from the outside, and you were so young as well.
Yeah, it really depends, and I found this throughout the years that it depends a lot on what team you're with, how you get along with your teammates, and so on. But like my first year, 2016 in Formula 4, it was pretty fun because I had two teammates which were my friends. We became good friends, and yeah, at the end is almost like you're on a school road trip all year long in a way. But at the same time, it's very competitive, and your teammates are your first rivals as well. So there is a combination between having fun and enjoying, and at the same time a lot of competition and stress and pressure.
And so then you made the move from F4 to F2, is that right?
No, so I went from F4 to GP3, which
Okay.
is a category in between.
Mhm.
Um, and I did 1.5 years. So I did 1.5 years in F4, 1.5 years in GP3, and 1 year. Last year was my first year in Formula 2.
I know your year in Formula 2 was pretty crazy and up and down, but do you remember the first day you started in Formula 2?
Yeah, my first time driving the car was in the Abu Dhabi post-season tests, 2018. So that was November or beginning of December 2018. And yeah, it was really, really exciting. It was obviously the fastest car I had driven to that date. Um, Actually, the move from GP3 to the F2 was not. It's a big step, but it was not as tough as I thought it would be to get used to the car in a way. Um, but there were a lot more things to think about. Like the F2 is a pretty complicated car. Also, the teams, the levels are higher. So each time you go up in category, you kind of get closer in the way the team works and the way the car works to a Formula One car, and that's each time more and more complicated. But it was really exciting, and the car was very fast. Um, I did really well as well in those first few days of test. So yeah, happy times.
And you were signed as well to be Alfa Romeo's development driver.
Yeah. So that came a bit together at the same time I was signing my contract for Formula 2. I signed with Alpha to become their. I was kind of a sim development driver in a way, and they were kind of just trying to get me included into the family, and possibly the start of a partnership that could hopefully would have ended up in a seat in their Formula One team. They saw great potential in me, and yeah, it was really nice. It was my first, not my first contact with an F1 team because I was part of the Lotus Junior Formula One team back in 2014 and 15. But this was my first real contact directly with the F1 with the F1 personnel, I would say it like that, because I was directly involved with engineers and with the drivers and stuff like this. And also F2 is racing the same weekends as Formula One, so I was always there, and I would be with Alpha on Sundays after my race and stuff like that. So it was very interesting and really a great experience. And up until now, even after the accident, I feel like I am not officially a part of the team because there's no role for me, but I am part of the family, and they've been really unconditional with their support.
And do you ever just find it, because I think it's amazing how, when you're sitting in that car, you know what you're about to do and how fast you're about to drive. Do you ever just get so nervous that you kind of think, I actually can't do this?
I do get very nervous. I think most of the drivers get very, very nervous. But not because of the speeds you're going through to, or it's not what makes us nervous is not driving the car, but actually the competition, and not crashing with other drivers, trying to trying to do a good job. That's it's more pressure than being nervous about driving. And there's a lot of things that you have to think about during a race, a lot of strategy. And it's not a team sport in the sense that once you're out on the track, it's just you and the car, and that's it, and it's all on you, and there's no time to really think or have a break. It's not like soccer where you can just take a moment or call a timeout and, okay, sub me out. Once you start the race, that's it. You better be on your A game, or it's gonna be a nightmare for you. So that's what, at least for me, that's what gets me nervous.
And obviously, you mentioned there a little bit about your accident. You're probably sick of talking about it by now, and I hate to be that person to ask you again. But yeah, I don't think we can tell your story without including it. Do you remember what happened on that day? I think it was August 2019.
Yeah, it was the 31st of August. It was Saturday in Spa, Belgium, and we had the race one that day. And it was just like any other racing weekend. Uh, you know, I woke up because many people tell me, "Oh, did you have any idea what was going to happen?" And obviously the answer is no. No one had any idea. It was just like any other Saturday with a race on it. And yeah, the race started. I had a very bad qualifying the day before. I made a mistake, so I was starting, I think, 14th on the grid out of 20. And we started. We finished the first lap, and right as we started the second lap, I made a pass, and then going up into corner 2 and 3, there was like a big chain of events between. It started with a guy 4 cars in front of me, so he crashed. Then the 2 people behind them tried to avoid him, and one of them crashed. And while all this was happening, I was coming up the hill, and one of the parts from the first guy went under my car. So I lost control of my car, and I just drove straight into the side of another car, Antoine Hubert. And yeah, we had an impact at like 220 kilometers an hour. Huge impact. He was standing still, and I hit him so hard that his car sped up to like 140 kilometers an hour just from a standstill. And we're talking about, this car's weigh around 750 kilos at the start of a race, so it's a big impact. Um, and yeah, I didn't lose consciousness. For me, it was just, I felt like I was nearly thrown out of the car. My car rolled over and came to a stop, and immediately I felt the pain in my legs, and that's when I really knew something was wrong. Because usually with the amount of adrenaline we have, I've had all the other crashes before, and in that moment you usually feel no pain at all. You feel invincible, and then the next 3 hours you cannot move out of the bed. But that was not the case in Spa. I felt the pain immediately. I thought I had lost the legs because I could just feel the shooting pain, but I couldn't move my feet. And that's really because they were disconnected. They were just hanging on by skin. So yeah, it was pretty horrible, to be honest. I couldn't breathe as well because of the huge impact. So I kind of pulled myself out of the car from underneath the car, and I asked the paramedics to sedate me and put me to sleep because I couldn't take the pain.
That's crazy. I could never imagine going through anything like that. And I think it's so inspiring how you've taken it on the chin. You seem so optimistic about it and your recovery and things. So how is the recovery going? Because I know right now, do you still have your leg in a brace?
Yeah. So right now it's still like in this metal cage. What it is basically like an exoskeleton, you know. So what happened was that my tibia on the right leg got disintegrated in the bottom part, so near the ankle. So they couldn't save that bone, and I basically had nearly 10 centimeters of a gap without bone in there. So they had to put this exoskeleton to kind of keep the leg together. And as well with this system that I have on, they were able to cut the bone surgically on the top and kind of stretch it out and grow back those 10 centimeters of bone. So that's what I did for like 3 or 4 months. And now the bone has grown, and I'm just waiting for the bone to solidify and become hard enough so I can put like my weight on it. So that's why I still have this, and it's gonna take a long time. It's like 2 months to 2.5 months per centimeter of new bone for it to solidify. So it's a long process, but you know, I'm kind of used to this thing by now, and eventually I will probably be able to walk a little bit with the exoskeleton on. So it's not that bad.
Does it still hurt really bad?
Nothing compared to what it hurt for months. Yeah, in the beginning, the pain was really bad. I had to be under a lot of drugs for many months, and really was just it was probably the worst thing about this whole process, about just being in constant pain 24/7. You know, I could barely sleep at all. I was very weak. You know, pain is just the worst thing that can happen to you, as a thing to have constantly there. But it slowly has gotten better, and now I'm at the point where I'm off any pain meds. I have been already for a few months, and you know the body's amazing. It really it heals by itself, and it gets used to everything. So you know I think 15 nails going through my leg and out the other side. Probably another 10 screws inside the foot, which you cannot see inside the leg. But the body gets used to it, and like I said, you know, as long as I don't bump it too much or put too much pressure on it, then it's fine.
And so what does a normal day look like for you now, kind of versus what it would have looked like for you while you're in racing mode, I guess?
Oh man, my worlds have fully changed. You know, I came from being very active, traveling a lot. I basically, before, when I was during the season, I was either training at a training camp I used to go in the French Pyrenees, so it's like up in the mountains, a very nice place. And so when I was there, it was usually like 6 to 8 hours of physical training per day. Or when I wasn't there, I was either traveling to, you know, simulator sessions, test sessions, or races. And now I'm kind of the opposite. You know, I'm in a wheelchair, but I'm still quite active. And up until the pandemic, I was, you know, driving by myself. I took myself to rehab or to the gym every day. So I was working out daily, even going to friends' houses, going out to eat. You know, I manage. I manage whatever comes my way. But at the moment, you know, with the home isolation and the quarantine, there's not much going on. I'm doing the rehab here at home and training, because I told you I have a small gym here, and you know, just keeping myself busy. I've also started an online course from Harvard University. You know, yeah, get my brain working a bit, so it's nice.
How do you think you kind of kept yourself so optimistic throughout the whole journey of your accident? Because I know for some people that would have just been so crippling, and you know, they might not have been able to deal with it at all.
Well, right now I feel quite optimistic, but there have been moments where I wasn't in this mood and optimistic at all. You know, it was a very tough process, the whole thing, and kind of in those tougher moments, what I did was just to kind of deal with it as best as I could then, and just told myself that, you know, better times were gonna come. Even though sometimes it felt like it was never ending, especially like I told you, when you have constant pain, you know, it feels like you're living in a nightmare pretty much, and that was very horrible. But it was a good learning experience as well, you know. And yeah, now I start to see somewhat the light at the end of the tunnel, which is very good. and relatively to where I was a few months ago, I'm doing great. So that's really crazy how life is always relative, and yeah, I don't know, it's also the people I have around me, my family, and maybe just my attitude in general. I think it has changed quite a lot with this accident, and from where I was a few months ago, it couldn't have gotten much worse than that. So I just feel optimistic. Yeah.
And what's your current situation with racing? Is there any chance that you will ever be able to race again? Or if you can, will you go back into the same team you left? Or how is that going to work?
So I definitely want to go back to racing, and I think there's every chance that I will be able to drive again. I will definitely never be up to 100% fitness with my legs again. But I'm fortunate that I'm a racing driver and not a ballet dancer. So I don't need 100% of my legs. If I can get them just good enough to brake and throttle, then I don't need any more. And I think that I will be able to do. So at the moment, I'm not really focused on who I will come back with. There's obviously my team in Formula 2 and Alfa Romeo that are supporting me still, and I feel like I'm still part of their family. But it's too early to start talking about that. I'm not even sure what category I will come back into. I would love to come straight into F2 again, but you never know. I'm taking one step at a time, and for me, the most important thing right now is to get my fitness and my rehab ready. And once I am ready, then I can start talking about the next step.
And if you weren't doing racing, or if, let's say, you couldn't race again, hopefully you can, but if you couldn't, what do you think you would do? Or what other career would have interested you?
Um, I've always been quite interested in business. My father is a businessman, and I come from a family, um, from my father's side especially, that is a very much business family. So that has always been quite appealing to me. But there are other things that I am passionate about, such as music, other sports. Not so much, to be honest. I am very competitive, but I would much rather be competitive in a business side than another sport. And especially now with my legs, I don't think I would be good for anything else. Maybe biking. So yeah, to be honest, I would really like to try like music producing or DJing a bit. And I think I'm going to do it even with the racing. So I just like exploring things in life. I like traveling. I like those kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things I could be doing.
It's a good time now to practice your DJing in quarantine.
Yeah, with all this time and no one to hear me yet, so I get to
Yeah,
practice.
perfect it before you put it out there. If you could pick one thing for each, what's the best thing about being a race car driver and the worst thing?
Hmm. The best thing, I think, are the sensations you get in the car, and the fact that you are different to everybody else in a way. You're in a way viewed, and you feel like kind of a superhuman, doing the speeds you're doing and the risks you're taking. That's a special feeling, and that's what I really like. The worst thing is the sacrifices that you have to make behind the scenes. Many people don't ever realize that, but being a race car driver is not the glamorous lifestyle that they portray to be. And even the very top people like Lewis Hamilton, you may think they are living a fairy tale, but they have had to sacrifice a lot, and much more than most other people have ever sacrificed in anything else. So that's very tough, and for me, that's the hardest thing.
Yeah, they definitely do a good job of making it look like a dream life with all the money and the parties and stuff, but I can imagine so much time and energy goes into it from such a young age as well. I think people don't realize how young you do start in the sport and how quickly I think it becomes your life.
Yeah.
If you had to pick a dream team to race for, do you have one?
If I could choose right now, I would go to Mercedes-Benz. They have been the strongest team the last 6 years already, and they seem like a very forward-thinking team. But there's also teams like Ferrari, which is obviously an icon in Formula One. There's teams like Red Bull, which are also very, very strong and modern in a way. But to be fair, any team, I love every team in a way, because what I love is the sport, and every team has an appealing side to it. And really, obviously, the most important thing is to win races. So if Mercedes is the one to do that with right now, then Mercedes. If it's gonna be Renault in a few years, Renault, McLaren, it doesn't really matter.
And I guess the end goal is to become world champion, is it?
Definitely, definitely. In general, as a life goal for me, it's not all about Formula One. I would love to become an F1 driver and become a world champion, but I think more important than that is to have just a successful racing career in general, because you can find just as good racing in other categories. Not the money you get in F1, but I'm not in this for the money anyway. So I just want to have fun, enjoy it, and race to win, because that's what I love.
And you kind of touched on it there a little bit, but do you have a personal definition of what success would look like?
Yeah, I think what I said about having a great career, leaving a legacy in a way, in really whatever you do, whatever category it is, in whichever country it is. For me, what's most important is just to be the best at it there is. And I think I have also important goals set after my racing career is done. So when you're a racing driver, if you retire by the time you're 40, then in racing terms you're very old by that age. But in a life in a lifetime, that's the middle of your life. So you still have a lot of living to do, and many people or many racing drivers don't really realize that. But there are many things I want to do after that. Probably pursue my business side. Maybe I will take a few years to relax and kind of let all the stress out of being a racing driver, because it's a non-stop thing, So I will probably do that for a bit, and who knows, maybe I will be a 45-year-old DJ. Basic things, human things, which I want as well.
If I put your 10-year-old self in front of you now, having been through the colossal amount that you've been through in your career and personally as well, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give your 10-year-old self moving forward in life?
I think I would tell him to work as hard as I have worked, because I have always been a hard worker. But I would probably tell him to ease off a bit, and just try to enjoy the little things a little bit more. And I mean this more in my career as a whole. I think looking back at it right now, like I said, it's a very stressful thing to do, a lot of pressure. And sometimes you get so caught up in all this stress and pressure that I think I forgot to enjoy it, which is the most important part. Um, Not saying that I didn't enjoy it in general. I love doing what I did, but I think I could have just relaxed a little bit more at certain stages and just go with the flow a bit. So yeah, I think it's part of growing and realizing things. But to be fair, I wouldn't change a lot of what I've done, because I am very happy with the person I have become. And the lessons I have learned through racing and through my experiences have taught me a lot, and I wouldn't change that for the world. I had people ask me if you could, looking back at what happened with the accident, if you could, would you change your life in a way and have done something else in life instead of racing, looking at the accident? And my answer is, looking at that Antoine passed away, of course, because it would have probably saved his life, but that's not really the point. For myself, as a lesson, I think I will still do it again, because even though I still don't know how much this will impact me for the rest of my life, my injuries are still very complicated, but I think the lessons I have learned in this last few months have been huge, really huge, and I think they will stay with me until the day I die. So in my opinion, that's very important.
Yeah, well, I think whatever you do, it seems like you have such a good attitude that you're going to do well in anything. So yeah, I really admire that. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today.
No problem. No, my pleasure, and all the best.
Thank you so much for listening, and as always, please rate, share, and leave a comment if you like what you hear. And don't forget to follow at What It's Like Pod on Instagram and Facebook. I'll be back next week with more inspiring stories, but for now, this has been What It's Like with Luz.